Hi guys, it's Marc Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Marc Zicree of Space Command, and today I'm going to talk about Elon Musk and a proposal he made about Mars the other day. It was very, very exciting. Now, many of you know that Elon Musk is the founder of SpaceX and the Tesla, an amazing visionary. And the other day he gave an hour talk where he proposed a plan he intends to implement to put 100 people on Mars in 6 years. An amazing visionary statement and planting his flag. So I want to talk about that. I wanted to talk about Mars and manned missions to Mars and Buzz Aldrin, who I got to talk to and hang out with last night. So the second man to land on the moon. So let's start basically way back in time to when I was 10 years old, a little tiny Mr. Sci-Fi, and I saw the first writer I'd ever seen in person, and that was Ray Bradbury. And Ray gave a talk at a library, and he said, ideally, your life and your art and your work should all come from the same place. And I think it was there that the seed of the idea of my becoming a writer was first planted. But also, I was hugely enamored of space. And back then, when I grew up, the race for the moon was on. We had the Mercury missions, then the Gemini, and then the Apollo. And science fiction and science went hand in hand. So the big writers who were promulgating the idea of manned spaceflight and landing on the moon and then Mars and exploring and colonizing space were the science fiction writers. They were the ones who were introducing these ideas to the general public. So it was Arthur C. Clarke, and Isaac Asimov, and Robert Heinlein, and Ray Bradbury. And I've talked before about how basically they were writing in a shared universe of assumptions that we would land on the moon, then colonize Mars, then go out to the planets and jump to the stars. And of course that's what I'm doing in Space Command, and it's a vision that I very much share, and a hopeful vision of the future, and one that I think is very possible. I mean, faster than light travel, we'll see. Hopefully we'll get it. But when I'm interviewed frequently about Space Command, I say the one thing that science fiction never predicted was that we would go to the moon and stop. And the reason, of course, was that because in science fiction, usually manned exploration and colonization was done by private companies or individual scientists, not by governments. But in the real world, governments took over manned spaceflight, and then they had a lock on it. And of course, as we know from things like presidential elections, often the goals and the aims of the politicians are very different from the goals and aspirations of the public. And so for the government, it was a race with the Russians, and once we won it, it was game over. And so why go back? Why do anything else? And because it was so expensive, they would keep kicking the ball down the road, or kicking the can down the road. And so it was always, we'll land a man on Mars in 30 years. But the 30 years kept getting extended and extended. And it was always 30 years from now, we'll do it 30 years from now, to where it was obvious that it was never going to happen because there would never be the political will. And then we got people like Elon Musk with SpaceX, where space travel started to become something that private companies could actually do themselves. And of course, Mars has always been an incredibly appealing goal. It's the most Earth-like of all the planets. It has an atmosphere. It has a topography of mountains, and canyons. Amazing stuff. And even H.G. Wells wrote War of the Worlds, suggesting malevolent aliens, malevolent Martians. But still, there was something very, very appealing. And Ray, of course, wrote the Martian Chronicles, which is a spectacular book about the colonization of Mars. And if you haven't read it, I urge you to read it. It's on audio. You can get it on Audible, or you can pick it up pretty much anywhere. Ray was influenced, fascinatingly enough, from the fact that his grandparents had traveled in covered wagon to Waukegan, Illinois, where he grew up. And when he was a kid, he lived in this idyllic small town. And then, because of the Depression, his father had to move the family. And at first they moved to Arizona. And when Ray was a teenager, when he was young, around 13 years old, and he would walk these deserts, and he would see the Indians and the remnants of the American Indian culture and how it had been decimated by the settlers. And all of this became his Mars, and his Martians. And also what got thrown into the mix was when he was a kid, King Tut's tomb was discovered in the 1920s, and the mask of King Tut became the masks that the Martians wore. But essentially what Ray was writing about during the Cold War and during the time of great fear of nuclear annihilation was the notion that if we went to Mars, even if we had a nuclear war here, even if mankind was wiped out here, we could then be on Mars. There'd be a second planet, and at the end of the Martian Chronicles, it's an extremely hopeful vision, and we become the Martians. We are the new Martians. And this is essentially what Elon Musk is proposing. But the fun part, and what I love about it, and what I'm so thrilled about it, is that, when Ray Bradbury was growing up, space travel was an impossibility, but he was dreaming of it. And the writer his favorite writer when he was a kid was Edgar Rice Burroughs, and he read the John Carter of Mars novels. And when he was 12, he got a toy typewriter, and he was so eager for the next Mars novel that he actually sat down at 12 and wrote it on this toy typewriter. And he told me, because we became friends, he became my dear mentor, he told me that as a kid he would go out into the night and put his arms up to the night sky and say, "Take me home." He would say that to Mars, "Mars, take me home." And he longed for that. And there's actually a geological feature on Mars named after Ray. And he really longed to live long enough to see the manned landing on Mars, but of course, sadly, he didn't get to see that because our governments, NASA, etc., and NASA is of course has the right will, but they're not, they don't fund themselves. So, and with Curiosity and Viking and all the wonderful Pathfinder, all the wonderful Mars missions, we got to see Mars, and we got to have our rovers, our robots on Mars, but manned missions were not to be from governmental agencies. So here's Elon Musk giving his talk. And what I love about it, and what I think is so terrific, is this, that when John F. Kennedy gave his talk, saying within this decade we will put a man on the moon, it was absolutely impossible to do when he said it. It was a huge, huge dream, a big dream and a big aspiration. And in the saying of it and the determining to do it, it made it happen. It changed the world and took something that was an impossibility and made it a reality. So this is what Elon Musk has done. And good morning. So here's how John F. Kennedy and Elon Musk are similar in their speech and what they're saying. So John F. Kennedy said, "We do this not because it is easy, but because it is hard." And this is exactly what Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX. He started his company. It was fascinating. In his speech, he said that there were, he had enough money for 3 launches, and the first 3 blew up, and he scraped enough money for a 4th launch. And if it had failed, he would have been bankrupt. That would have been that. But fortunately, it succeeded, and his company got a contract from NASA, and they were off and running. So now what he's saying, but now what he's proposing, and again, for decades, everyone was saying, well, maybe we'll be able to send 1 man, 2 men. And then there was a reality show saying, oh, well, we'll send a reality, we'll send people there, one-way trip. But the reality show is the wrong spirit, because that's not the spirit of exploration, the spirit of daring in the same way as Elon Musk. Because when Elon Musk says it, he's building it. And also, it was funny, I was at an event last night, Mars City Design. It's a competition for livable habitats on Mars. It was quite wonderful to go to it. And Buzz Aldrin, I was a guest speaker and with Space Command, and Buzz Aldrin was there as the key speaker. And he was the second man to land on the moon, and he so much wants manned exploration, manned journeys out into space, and he has proposals for the moon landings and Mars landings and so forth. But he doesn't have the cash, he doesn't have the infrastructure to do it. So essentially he's just trying to convince people. But Elon Musk, on the other hand, is building it. And there were people at SpaceX that were there in person. I was talking to them. I'm going to get a tour of the plant, which we'll probably talk about soon in another Mr. Sci-Fi event and another sci-fi podcast. But here's what Elon Musk proposes. Within 2 years, every 2 years he wants to send a rocket to Mars. It's going to be methane fueled, and the first one he plans to send unmanned with provisions in 2 years, 2018, and then every 2 years he'll be sending more of these provisional ships, and then in 2016 his plan is to send a vast, enormous spaceship to Mars with 100 people, and that will be the beginning, the toehold of a colony, a Mars colony. And this is a bold, crazy, wonderful plan, and he's intending to do it. He says in his talk that everything he's done with his companies, everything he's done to this point has been solely to finance manned colonization of Mars. And again, his idea is that if anything happens to us on Earth, we'll be there as well, and then we can spread out from there. He's talking about fueling stations on the outer moons of the system, all sorts of things. Bold vision. So again, the thing about all of this is you start with the bold vision. You start by planting your flag, and then you back it up. And it takes both of those things. Because if you're just talking about, well, here's what I'd like to have happen, and you don't back it up, it doesn't happen. This is what's been going on with NASA and all of these succession of presidents saying, we will put a man on Mars. You remember all the presidents saying that? But they weren't John F. Kennedy. They didn't mean it. And but Elon Musk does. And I think he's going to do it. I think he's going to pull it off. And it was funny because last night when I was talking to Buzz Aldrin and looking at all these wonderful young people present their plans for livable habitats on Mars and how to grow crops on Mars, the thing that I thought of that almost no one talks about, but I think it's really important, is why go out into space? Why have manned missions? And of course survival of humanity is nice, and we want that, of course. But for me, it's what it presents us. The question becomes, what kind of humans do we want to be? And I think that's a really important question. Because again, the manned moon landing, for the American government, it was beating the Russians. But for the rest of the world, for humanity, it was the greatest thing humanity had done. It was, or many of us feel that way, it was a shared moment of human accomplishment. And last night, when we had people presenting these plans for Mars cities, some of them were from France and some were from China. And there was a woman and her partner, they were from Tehran. She lives in Houston, but her partner's in Tehran. They're Iranian. And there were people from England and Australia. It was the world sharing in this vision. And people who might be enemies in the prosaic, stupid political world of our world become friends, become allies, become shared human beings in a great adventure, in a great plan, in a great possibility. And so for me, what makes manned landing on Mars so exciting and manned colonization of Mars so exciting is that it presents us as the best of humanity. And it challenges us to be better, to be more, to embrace love and compassion and bold adventure. And I think this is hugely important because we can either tear ourselves apart, we can either live in fear and divisiveness, or we can reach out and reach up and create something more and something better and something hugely exciting. Because, we're not going to be enemies if we're working together toward a vision. We're not going to be small or petty or greedy or selfish or stupid. We're going to be the best of what we are: noble, loyal, loving, brave, smart, and that's what Elon Musk is challenging us to be and inviting us to be. And I think he's going to pull it off. And I didn't think until he gave that talk that I would see manned colonization of Mars in my lifetime. But now I think there's actually a hope of it. And I hope he succeeds. I will put in my hard-earned cash if he does a Kickstarter campaign. And I think this is just great. So, and in terms of Buzz Aldrin, to bookend meeting him with Elon Musk's talk was perfect. Because here was a man who had walked on the moon. And I'm sure that when he walked on the moon, and in fact I know this for a fact, he never dreamed that almost 50 years later he would be the one of the teeny tiny and diminishing number who had actually walked on another celestial body. And he longs as much as any of us do for that no longer to be the truth, but for more and more and more people to go. And Elon Musk is talking about ultimately 1 million people colonizing Mars and getting the price per person down to below $200,000 to convey them, so someone could save up $200,000 and go to Mars. So this is wonderful, and I think it's going to be great, and we'll see what happens. But I wanted to share it with you, Mr. Sci-Fi, and you know where to find me. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and check out Space Command, spacecommandmovie.com, and it was very fun because the scene we showed was set on Mars. And so we're doing what Arthur C. Clarke and Heinlein and Asimov and my dear friend Ray Bradbury did, which is we're with the science fiction writers who are working hand in hand with the scientists to say this is possible and this is what we're going to do. And it was very fun to talk to the head of JPL and say, well, I'm doing a project that shows the colonization of the solar system and jumping to the stars. And you know, our story is set in Earth, Mars, the asteroid belt, the outer moons of the solar system, and beyond. So that's it for now. Mr. Sci-Fi, Marc Zicree of Space Command, thanks so much. Glad to be sharing this adventure with you. And tell your friends, spread the word, let people know, and we'll talk to you really, really soon. Bye-bye.